The first time my parents realized the house was legally mine, my mother was standing in the driveway holding a casserole dish, and my father was yelling at a sheriff's deputy. "You can't remove us," he shouted. "This is a family property." The deputy looked down at the papers in his hand, then back at my father. "Sir, the owner of record is Miss Emily Carter." My mother turned slowly toward me. For once, she had no words. The neighbor they had invited to live in my house stood behind them with 2 suitcases, her mouth open like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Her son, the same man my parents always praised as more responsible than me, was trying to quietly load a box into his car before anyone noticed. But everyone noticed, especially me. I stood on the sidewalk in a black coat, holding my keys, watching the same people who had treated me like an ungrateful child finally understand one simple truth. They had given away something that was never theirs. For months, they told everyone I was selfish. They said I abandoned family values. They said I cared more about money than people. What they didn't say was that they had moved our neighbor into my house without asking me. They didn't say they changed the locks. They didn't say they used my grandmother's death to manipulate me. And they definitely didn't say they had been collecting rent behind my back. My father pointed at me with shaking hands. "You tricked us." I almost laughed. "No," I said quietly. "You just never bothered to find out who you were stealing from." That was when my mother's face turned pale. Because she knew. She knew there was more in those papers than just my name. And what happened next changed everything. But to understand why my own parents thought they could give away my home like an old couch, you need to understand the kind of daughter I used to be. Looking back, I should have seen the signs much sooner. My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I was the daughter who didn't cause problems. At least, that was what my parents called it. Quiet, helpful, responsible, easy. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, in a pale yellow house with a cracked front step and a maple tree that turned bright orange every October. From the outside, we looked like a normal family. My father, Richard, worked in insurance. My mother, Diane, volunteered at church. My older brother, Mark, was the golden child who could do no wrong. And I was the daughter who cleaned up whatever he ruined. When Mark crashed my father's truck at 17, I was the one who gave up my summer job money to help pay the deductible because my parents said, "Your brother is already embarrassed enough." When Mark dropped out of community college after 1 semester, my mother cried for 3 days, and somehow I ended up comforting her. When I got straight A's, my father nodded and said, "That's what we expect from you." When Mark passed 1 certification test after failing twice, they threw him a party. I learned early that love in my family had conditions. Mark received love because he existed. I received approval when I was useful. My grandmother, Ruth, was the only person who saw me clearly. She lived in a small white house on Hawthorne Lane, with blue shutters, rose bushes, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. Every Sunday afternoon, I went there after church. She made tea, listened to me talk about school, and never once told me I was being dramatic. "You're allowed to want things, Emily," she told me once when I was 16. I shrugged. "I know." "No," she said softly. "You know it for other people, not for yourself." That sentence stayed with me. My dream was simple. I wanted a home of my own, not a mansion, not anything fancy, just a place where nobody could make me feel like a guest in my own life. I worked from the time I was 14. Babysitting, coffee shops, office filing, anything I could do after school and on weekends. I saved birthday money. I saved tips. I saved the $20 bills Grandma Ruth slipped into my coat pocket even when I told her not to. "You'll need a door that locks one day," she used to say. I thought she meant independence. Now I understand she meant protection. After college, I moved into a small apartment and worked in property management. It was not glamorous, but I loved learning how leases worked, how titles worked, how ownership worked. Paperwork made sense to me. People could lie, but documents had dates, signatures, and consequences. My parents didn't understand why I wouldn't move back home. "You're wasting money on rent," my father said. "I like having my own space," I replied. My mother frowned. Family shouldn't need space from family, but I did. I needed space from guilt, from Mark's emergencies, from my mother's sighs, from my father's reminders that I owed them for raising me. Still, I showed up when they called. I drove my mother to appointments. I helped my father organize taxes. I lent Mark money twice and never got it back. I told myself boundaries could come later. But I was wrong, because the first real betrayal began after Grandma Ruth got sick. And at the time, I had no idea my parents were already planning what they thought should happen to her house. Grandma Ruth's illness moved slowly at first, then all at once. One month, she was pruning roses in the front yard. The next, she needed help climbing the porch steps. I started visiting after work, bringing groceries, organizing medications, sitting beside her while she watched old game shows and pretended not to be scared. My parents visited too, but differently. My mother brought flowers and took photos. My father asked about bank accounts. Mark showed up once, stayed 20 minutes, and left with Grandma's old record player because he said she wasn't using it anyway. I remember standing in the hallway, watching him carry it out. "Mark," I said, "did she give you that?" He rolled his eyes. "Relax. It's not like she's going to throw parties." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. Looking back, I should have recognized the sign. In my family, silence always protected Mark. Grandma passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand. My mother was in the cafeteria getting coffee. My father was on the phone with someone from work. Her last words to me were barely a whisper. "Don't let them make you small." At the funeral, my mother cried loudly. Mark stood near the casket looking uncomfortable. My father accepted condolences like he was the head of some tragic business merger. 3 weeks later, we gathered in a lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I expected nothing. Maybe a few photographs, maybe her tea set. Instead, the attorney adjusted his glasses and said, "The property located at 118 Hawthorne Lane is left solely to Emily Carter." My mother gasped. My father went still. Mark laughed once, sharply. "You're kidding." The attorney looked at him. "I am not." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Grandma had left me the house. Her house. The house where I had always felt safe. My mother turned to me with wet eyes, but they were not tears of joy. "Emily," she said carefully, "you know Grandma wasn't thinking clearly near the end. She updated the will 2 years ago," the attorney said. My father's jaw tightened. Mark muttered, "Of course. Perfect Emily gets everything." "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. My father leaned forward. "Then do the right thing." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means this house should stay available for the family." There it was. Not congratulations. Not Grandma trusted you. Not we're happy she gave you something meaningful. Just do the right thing. And somehow, the right thing always meant giving up what was mine. For weeks, they pressured me. My mother called every night. "Your brother could use a fresh start," my father said. "You don't even have children. What do you need a house for?" Mark texted me listings of expensive apartments and wrote, "You're better off selling." I refused. Quietly, at first, then firmly. "No, I'm keeping Grandma's house." That was when my mother's voice changed. "You're becoming selfish." The word hit harder than I wanted it to. Because even after everything, some part of me still wanted her approval. I moved into Grandma's house 2 months later. I painted the bedroom, fixed the porch light, replaced the kitchen faucet. I planted lavender by the steps because Grandma always loved the smell. For the first time in my life, I had a place that felt like mine, but that peace did not last. Because soon after, our neighbor Linda Patterson started visiting my parents, and I did not know yet that my house had become the answer to her problems. Linda Patterson lived 3 houses down from my parents. She was the kind of woman who always knew everyone's business and somehow made gossip sound like concern. She had a son named Tyler, who was 32, unemployed more often than not, and treated every setback like a personal injustice. My mother adored Linda. "She has had such a hard life," Mom would say. Linda's hard life, apparently, included 3 vacations a year, a new SUV, and a son who refused to keep a job. I didn't pay much attention until one evening when my mother called me. "Emily, Linda needs help." I was in Grandma's kitchen, sanding an old cabinet door. "What kind of help?" "They're between places." "For how long?" My mother hesitated. "Just a few months." I already knew where this was going. "No? You haven't even heard me out. I'm not letting Linda and Tyler move into my house." My mother's voice sharpened. "Your house? That sounds ugly." "It is my house. It was your grandmother's house, and she left it to me." My mother went quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. That house is changing you." "No," I thought. "That house is showing me who you are," but I didn't say it. I should have. 2 weeks later, my job sent me to Cincinnati for a 3-month project. It was a promotion opportunity, and I needed the experience. I locked up the house, asked a trusted coworker to check on it occasionally, and told my parents I would be back most weekends. The first weekend, everything was normal. The second weekend, my key did not work. I stood on the porch in the cold, staring at the lock. At first, I thought I was tired. I tried again. Nothing. Then I heard movement inside. A curtain shifted. The door opened, and Tyler Patterson stood there, wearing my grandfather's old cardigan. My stomach dropped. "What are you doing in my house?" He smiled like I was the intruder. "Oh. Your parents said you knew." I pushed past him. The living room smelled like takeout and cigarettes. My grandmother's quilt was on the floor. Boxes were stacked against the wall. Linda's ceramic angels lined the mantel where Grandma's framed photos used to be. I couldn't breathe. "Where are my things?" Linda appeared from the hallway. "Emily, honey, don't make this awkward." I turned to her. "Get out." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Get out." Tyler laughed. "Your dad said we could stay until summer." "My dad does not own this house." Linda folded her arms. "Your parents said this was family property and that you were being difficult." I called my mother with shaking hands. She answered cheerfully. "Hi, sweetheart. You changed my locks." Silence. "Then, we had to. Linda needed keys. You moved people into my house. Temporarily. Without asking me." "We did ask. You said no." I almost dropped the phone. "And you did it anyway?" My father got on the line. "Emily, stop being hysterical." That word lit a fire in my chest. "I want them out tonight." "No," he said. I froze. "No? Linda has nowhere to go. She has a sister in Dayton." "That isn't the point." "Then what is the point?" His voice turned cold. "The point is that you have more than you need, and this family does not raise selfish women." I looked around at my grandmother's house, now invaded by strangers my parents had chosen over me. But that still wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing came when Tyler walked out of the bedroom carrying a box of my documents. "What is that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Your mom said to move your junk to the garage." My junk. My grandmother's letters. My tax records. My childhood photos. My life had been boxed up and pushed aside to make room for people who had no right to be there. I went to the garage and found water damage from a leaking roof. Several boxes were soaked. Grandma's handwritten recipes were ruined. Old photos curled at the edges. A quilt she made me smelled like mildew. Something inside me cracked. I called the police, but because Linda claimed my parents had permission and showed a handwritten family arrangement signed by my father, the officer called it a civil matter. "You'll need to handle this legally," he said. I spent that night in a motel. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because my own home had been taken from me by the people who were supposed to protect me. I cried until morning. Then I called a lawyer. And that was the first time I stopped asking my parents to understand. I started preparing to make them answer. The next few months were some of the hardest of my life. Not because the law was unclear. It wasn't. The deed was in my name. The title was clean. The property tax bills came to me. My grandmother had been painfully precise about everything. The hard part was realizing how far my parents were willing to go to make me feel guilty for defending myself. My mother sent long messages. Linda is crying because of you. Your grandmother would be ashamed. You have become cold. My father left voicemails. You are tearing this family apart over a house. You need to think about how this looks. People are talking. People were talking because he made sure they did. At church, my mother told people I had evicted a struggling family. Linda told neighbors I was greedy. Tyler posted online about spoiled people who inherit houses and forget where they came from. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream the truth from the roof. But my lawyer, Daniel, told me to stay quiet. Let them talk, he said. Paperwork talks louder. So I collected everything. The deed, the will, tax records, locksmith receipts my parents had stupidly paid with my father's credit card, photos of the damaged items, screenshots of Tyler bragging online about free housing. Then came the detail that changed everything. My coworker, Serena, who had been checking on the house, called me late one night. Emily, she said, did you know there's rent involved? I sat up in bed. What? I ran into Linda at the grocery store. She complained that your parents still expected payment even though you were threatening legal action. My mouth went dry. Payment to who? Your parents. For a few seconds, I could not speak. Then I whispered, they're charging her rent? Apparently, yes. My parents had not just lent out my house. They had rented it out. $300 a month in cash, according to Linda. Not market rent, not even close. But enough to prove intent. Enough to prove they knew they were controlling property that did not belong to them. I remember sitting in my tiny Cincinnati apartment, staring at the wall, feeling something colder than anger settle inside me. All my life, I had confused silence with peace. I had believed being patient made me kind. But patience with people who exploit you is not kindness. It is permission. So I stopped giving permission. Daniel filed formal notices. We began the eviction process. We prepared a civil claim for damages and unauthorized rental income. My parents laughed at first. My father called it a tantrum with paperwork. My mother said, no judge is going to punish parents for helping a neighbor. But they didn't know what we had. They didn't know about the rent. They didn't know about the bank deposit slips. They didn't know Linda had started keeping receipts because she didn't trust them either. And they definitely didn't know Grandma Ruth had left behind one final document that would destroy their favorite lie. The court hearing happened on a gray Monday morning. My parents arrived together, dressed like respectable victims. My mother wore pearls. My father wore his church suit. Linda sat behind them, dabbing her eyes. Tyler looked bored. I sat beside Daniel with a folder thick enough to make my father nervous. The judge asked my parents a simple question. What legal authority did you have to allow Miss Patterson and her son to occupy the property? My father cleared his throat. The house belonged to my wife's mother. It has always been understood as family property. The judge looked at the deed. The owner is Emily Carter. My mother leaned forward. Your Honor, Emily is our daughter. We were acting in the family's best interest. Daniel stood. Your Honor, the issue is not whether they considered themselves family. The issue is whether they had permission from the legal owner. My father's face tightened. Then came the first twist. Daniel presented text messages where I had clearly said no, not maybe, not later, no. My mother stared at the screen as her own words appeared beneath mine. You are being selfish. Then my response. I do not consent to anyone living in my house. The courtroom went still, but that was only the beginning. Daniel then presented proof that my parents had collected cash payments from Linda. Linda's receipts, bank deposits. A handwritten note from my mother saying, rent for Hawthorne House. My mother's face went pale. My father whispered, Diane. Linda suddenly sat up straighter. I thought they were allowed to do that, she said. The judge's expression hardened. Then came the second twist. Daniel opened Grandma Ruth's final letter. I had found it inside a sealed envelope in her safe deposit box, marked, "For Emily, if they try to take the house." My hands trembled the first time I read it. In the letter, Grandma wrote that she was leaving the house to me, specifically because she believed my parents would pressure me, guilt me, or try to use Mark or others to take control of it. She wrote that she had watched me sacrifice too much for too long. Then Daniel read the line that broke the room open. I do not want Richard, Diane, or Mark to have any authority over this property, because they have repeatedly treated Emily's responsibility as something they are entitled to exploit. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked like he had been slapped. Mark, who had not even bothered to come until that moment, stood near the back wall with his arms crossed, suddenly much less confident. The judge ordered Linda and Tyler to vacate immediately. My parents were ordered to repay the unauthorized rent, cover damages, reimburse locksmith costs, and face further review for fraudulent misrepresentation. But the true shock came after the hearing. Linda turned on them, right there in the hallway. "You told me," she agreed. Linda hissed. My mother whispered, "We thought she would come around. You took my money." My father snapped. "You got a place to stay." Tyler muttered, "This is messed up." For once, nobody was blaming me. They were turning on each other. And I realized something with perfect clarity. The truth did not need revenge. It only needed daylight. The eviction happened 3 days later. That was the day from the beginning. The sheriff's deputy stood in the driveway. Linda cried. Tyler complained. My parents acted outraged until the deputy read my name from the paperwork. Owner of record, Emily Carter. My mother stared at me like she had never really seen me before. "Emily," she said, voice trembling, "please don't do this." I looked at the house behind her. Grandma's roses were crushed. The porch rail was scratched. One window screen was torn. But the house still stood. So did I. "You already did this," I said. "I'm just ending it." My father stepped toward me. "You're making a public spectacle of your own family." "No," I said. "You did that when you gave away my home and charged rent for it." His face flushed. "That money was for expenses." "What expenses?" He said nothing. My mother started crying harder. "We were trying to help Linda." "You were trying to control me." "That's not fair." I laughed softly. Fair? That word sounded almost foreign coming from her. Fair would have been asking me. Fair would have been respecting my no. Fair would have been protecting Grandma's things instead of letting strangers destroy them. My mother whispered, "We didn't think you'd take it this far." And there it was. The truth. They didn't think I would defend myself. Not legally, not publicly, not completely. They had built their entire plan on the old version of me, the daughter who apologized to keep peace, the daughter who absorbed pain quietly, the daughter who gave in when her mother cried. But that daughter was gone. The consequences came naturally. Linda moved out and sued my parents separately for misrepresentation. Tyler disappeared to another state. My parents had to sell one of their cars to cover legal costs and damages. Their church friends stopped seeing them as generous neighbors and started seeing them as people who had rented out their daughter's house without permission. Mark called me once. "You happy now?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm free," he scoffed. "You always have to make yourself the victim." I ended the call. No argument, no defense, no explanation. That was another kind of victory. A month later, I moved back into the house. The first night, I slept on an air mattress in the living room because most of my furniture had been damaged or moved. The walls smelled faintly of smoke. The floorboards were scratched. The silence felt enormous, but it was mine. I opened every window. I threw away what could not be saved. I washed what could, and then I placed Grandma Ruth's photo back on the mantel. "I didn't let them take it," I whispered. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. People think betrayal always looks dramatic. Sometimes it looks like changed locks, a casserole dish, a mother saying, "Don't be selfish," A father acting like your property belongs to him because your obedience always did. I used to believe family meant giving until there was nothing left of me. Now I know family without respect is just control wearing a familiar face. Grandma Ruth left me more than a house. She left me proof that I was worth protecting. And in the end, the house became what she always wanted it to be. Not a prize, not a weapon, not family property, a home, my home. I lost people I once tried very hard to love. But I gained a front door that locks, a life that belongs to me, and a voice strong enough to say no without apologizing. What would you have done if your own parents gave your house to someone else and then acted like you were the selfish one for wanting it back? Would you forgive them? Or would you walk away for good? Share your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this hit hard for anyone who has ever been guilted, used, or made to feel wrong for protecting what belongs to them. If this story made you feel something, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We bring you emotional stories about family betrayal, hidden secrets, unfair treatment, and the moment ordinary people finally stand up for themselves. And make sure you come back for the next story, because sometimes the biggest twist is not revenge. It is finally choosing yourself.